boat, and he was still just standing there. I'm like, run, Tommy, run. It was like Ariel up in there. She was like, oh, starts singing, right? I said, no. This wasn't like the songs like you hear like in the fairy tales or in the stories. This was like a bunch of notes all happening at once and all like, harmonizing. That's when the air started to shift and things got weird. I described the twisty, naughty, like tune, like it was digging, he says, his words, a hook into the back of my and pulling me towards her.
Welcome to the third place. Ignore the fact that my picture is hanging wonky in the background, but welcome to the third place. On this channel, this is the place between folklore and conspiracy. We stop laughing, we stop blindly believing, and we actually start looking at serious pattern. If you are new here, my name is Rosie. I am a water-coded mystic as well as an Axis Mundi embodied, not to mention a whole host of other things. And I am a bridge, and that is why I sit in between in this third place. I take the story out of mythos and into reality because there are, in my opinion, there's truth to these stories, and I just look for the pattern. I'm also late diagnosed neurodivergent, which means that my pattern recognition is on lock and above average, to be honest. And I don't say that to flex, but I just say that so that you understand the person that's talking to you and where I'm coming from with my information. All right, and so you get to know me a little bit better. Like, the reason why I do this is because most of the times when people talk about these kinds of topics, they get stuck in two places. It's either fairy tale or it's either conspiracy. There's never a third ground, which really means that we never actually really get to the bottom of understanding, is there truth to this? Like, where are the people that are doing that? I am the person that is doing that, all right? I know most people just love to listen to the stories. So if you are here to just listen to the stories and to have a fun and just to hear these cool stories, then please stick around and listen to the stories. But if you're somebody that's interested in understanding the deep, whether there's actuality behind it in terms of consciousness, spirituality, what is going on in the in-between, then stick around for that, because I also deep dive into that. So take your pick. Both things are here for you, and just enjoy. So what do we find in this third place? This is important for you guys to understand. In this third place, we're hearing witness accounts. We are mapping things geographically. We are looking for patterns. We are looking for schemas where symbolism, folklore, and spiritual perception intersect. And it's in that third place where possible truth starts to overlap. We start to see truth coming through, or we start to add real life backbone to it, is the only way that I can put it. And that's where I reside as a mystic. No, we don't want to blindly believe. That's not what we're about. We're not blindly believing. We're not instantly dismissing it. We're looking for patterns. We're looking for threads. Are you with me? Are we down? Let's go. Now, my little third place peeps, in case you're wondering, where are the videos? But where are the videos? We went through those videos. The 3 videos I'm talking about, I played in full in the video before this one. So if you go down to my description box, or if you just click onto my channel and you look at the video that was uploaded before this, you'll be able to watch all videos and encounters and know exactly what I'm talking about. And then you can hop back to this one. But this video, I'm not going to be playing any of the encounters in full because I already have, and it's just going to waste time. So go and watch that and then come back. Or if you don't mind, just listen along and then you can go and find the videos afterwards.
Soaking wet, but the proportions were weird. Mouth open wider than a human's could. There were too many teeth and the eyes were glossed over like fish eyes.
He saw her teeth and was like, "Arr!" They were small, sharp, and needle-like. She had way too many in her mouth. Like they were just jam-packed in there. He said, first, it wasn't like a mass of little bodies. It was one big body. It had a face.
Closer to the boat, and it had a woman's face, and she was pale.
Lower half of the body was submerged. The rest was up. It was like looking at him. He said the eyes were like off, too dark, too sunken in, too big. Long dark hair. It like stuck to her face.
He said she had long black hair that floated behind her. At first, he actually thought it was seaweed. And he said her eyes, Jesus, her eyes weren't right. He said her eyes were too dark, too deep. He said, I swear to you, Ashley, it was like her eyes were peeling me open. So he was just staring at her. He said he couldn't move, even though he wanted to call out to the other guys.
They seem to be the same type of aquatic creature. I'm willing to bet good money on it.
Like land mammals, but he said he really didn't want to know. And that's when somebody taps him and tells him to put his headphones on, and they say basically don't take them off no matter what you think you hear. Kevin's dad goes to put on his headphones, but as he's like placing them over his ears, he can hear like a woman talking, and he's looking around the boat like, is there a woman on here? And he said it was like different women's voices. Like one of the other crew members started taking his headphones off, and two of the other guys jumped on top of him and started restraining him. And he tells Kevin that they hauled something onto the boat, and when he first saw it, his brain like just totally rejected it. Buddy, the one that got him the job, walks over to him and motions for him to take off the headphones. He basically tells him that they're not as powerful when they're out of water.
He'd been scared, but he wasn't. Everything in his mind was telling him to run, but instead he just kind of stood there. Because he said that even though her face looked weird and off or whatever, that she was beautiful. Then she was like reaching towards the boat, and he was still just standing there. I'm like, run, Tommy, run. It was like Ariel up in there. She was like, oh, starts singing, right? He said, no. This wasn't like the songs like you hear like in the fairy tales or in the stories. This was like a bunch of notes all happening at once and all like, harmonizing. That's when the air started to shift and things got weird. I described the twisty, naughty like tune, like it was digging, he says, his words, a hook into the back of my and pulling me towards. Are the words,
come closer.
No one told me, probably did. Let's keep going. I was wrong. He said, I didn't hear the words. I felt them slipping into my bones, curling around my thoughts like seaweed. He leaned forward. So he didn't go, but he leaned in like, what's happening? He kind of lost sight for a second. So he's like leaned forward. He's like looking down. And he looks down and he sees her like this.
Come on. Jump down to me. I got you. Come on down here.
I don't think she really said jump, but that's what she was doing. She was like looking up at him like, come on, get in. Something told him not to do it, that the water was like, getting weird and looked even darker, and he could still just hear her song. It was getting, he says, louder and louder, and the water was so close that it felt like he was being pulled in, even though he felt like he hadn't moved. Then she started like conjuring up the elements or something, and he said that the wind like pushed him into the side of the boat, like pushed him closer to her. That's when her face changed. Suddenly, what he thought was beauty was gone. She's like gnarly, darked out, like spiky teeth, and like her face is all sunken in. And she's like, clenched her jaw and opened her mouth like, lunged at him. He grabbed like whatever he could grab, and he like starts swinging at her. This gaff thing that's got the hook on the end, and it catches her in the shoulder. Then she let out this gnarly, horrific scream. Calm sea turned instantly violent. Waves were like slamming into his boat. He fell back, hit his head on the deck. By the time he was able to like, scoot back and climb up and all this stuff, she's gone.
Now, looking back at those two clips by Ashley Inc. and Tiffany's Ghost Talk, the pattern becomes undeniable, all right? So let's bin the Disney version of a Siren or Mermaid singing using actual lyrics, words. It's not about the music. It's not about the song. It's about the tone, the frequency. Okay, that's real. If you look at how it's depicted in the TV show Siren, that's probably the most realistic. And so when we look at the story where the creature, the lady was humming a tangled web of raw tones, it isn't about music at all right? It's an acoustic frequency. And there is a massive clue hidden in the second clip where the crew had to keep total blackout headphones on until they were out of range. Because as they said, they aren't as powerful when they're not in water. So let's talk about that fluid connection, all right? Let's talk about sound frequencies, and let's break down the terrifying real-world biology of how these acoustic tones can physically lock up a human brain. Let's go to that third place. Now, I've had to write everything down because I don't want to be waffling on and just like, blah. I've written everything down. However, these are all my own musings and downloads of, what it is. So we've heard the story. We've listened to the two stories. We heard specifically in Tiffany's video how the fisherman described the sound as if it was coming into the back of his mind, all right, like hooking at the back of his head, all right, and feeling it like as if it was all around his face. And I thought that's a very interesting way to phrase that. All right, that's a really interesting way to phrase that. And so from that, this is what I wrote down. Let me know what you think. All right, so The anatomy of a siren's hijack, because what I'm doing is I'm taking it from fairy tale and hoax and into something that could be feasibly possible in real life, even if it does fall under esoterica. We've got the brainstem. The brainstem is what we see at the back of the head, okay? And so the mermaid's voice, I wrote the mermaid/siren's voice hooks into the base of the skull, seizing the pathway between the mind and the body, okay? At the back there, we also have the cerebellum, all right? The voice rewrites muscle memory, forcing the victim to unconsciously walk and lean over the edge of the boat without their permission. And then we have the snapback, all right? The sudden break happens when an external shock, like a loud splash or something happens that sort of breaks the dream, breaks the hypnosis, so to speak, and it floods the brain stream, all right, the brain stem with a stronger real-world sensory signal. And that instantly shatters the sort of the psychic connection that this being is essentially pulling in. So if I was to be more scientific about it, well, let's talk about it. So what does the brainstem do? The brainstem sits at the very base of the skull, connecting the brain to the spinal cord. It acts as the gatekeeper for every single nerve signal traveling between the body and the mind, okay? The psychic concept, so that's the concept that I'm playing with here to see what could be going on in the real world. If a mermaid's voice or siren's voice or aquatic being's voice hooks into the brainstem, it has effectively seized the crossroads of the entire nervous system. By taking over the area, the entity can block the victim's real willpower from reaching their muscles. So the hooked effect, the victim would feel completely conscious and aware, all right, but trapped inside their own skin. The mermaid could force their legs to walk into the water while the victim helplessly watches. Very Get Out, very hypnosis, very this sounds plausible. We saw that in the story. So what is the cerebellum? The puppeteering and automatic movement center. So located above the brainstem at the back of the head, the cerebellum is the part of the brain. The cerebellum coordinates balance, posture, and complex fluid movement. This is the part of the brain that handles things you do without thinking, like walking, swimming, or reaching for an object. The hooked effect. Instead of jerking like a broken robot, a victim controlled like the fisherman, through the cerebellum would move with an eerie, unnatural grace. The siren song seamlessly rewrites their motor patterns, making them glide toward the ocean as if it were a natural instinct. And that is what we see and sense in both of these stories, do we not? The occipital lobe, right here, all right, hijacking reality. The very back of the cerebral cortex houses the occipital lobe, which is highly dedicated to processing vision. Voice goes all around from the back. It is spreading from the visual cortex to the rest of the brain. The hooked effect, by tapping into the occipital lobe, first, the mermaid or the siren can project terrifying or beautiful hallucinations directly into the victim's minds. This victim then doesn't just hear a voice. No, they're icy dry land where there's actually perhaps a steep cliff or a steep ocean drop-off. Or they see a beautiful face where there is a large awning, sharp teeth, and dustiness going on. All right, aka glamour. Sound waves would enter the ears, all right, the temporal lobe, bypass conscious thoughts, and anchor directly into the brainstem. From there, it would spread forward, okay, like a root system, you know, like roots, like a tree, seizing the cerebellum, all right, making the fisherman or the person want to, you know, do the action that it really shouldn't be doing. And the occipital lobe steps in, tag teams in to blind them to the danger around them. I swear a lot of missing 411 stories are probably have this stuff going on. So this is why, what I mean by I'm taking fairy tale or story and we're giving it backbone as to how this may actually work in the real world, to show that these things could be happening. This isn't magic, all right? It's not magic. That's the main point. Now, I talk about frequency, or people in the spiritual community, they understand about frequency. We talk about this all the time. Now, plays a really important part in the siren song, because most people think about the siren song as, you know, the siren singing and her singing, and it's about the song, and it's about drawing them in. But I posit, and I actually think, when the more I think about and listen to these things, that it actually is not about the song. It's about the frequency. It's about the tone. It's about what does that mean. Now we see in the animal kingdom, and even when we talk about cryptids as well, you hear many stories like Bigfoot, crawlers, dogmen. They incapacitate the victim or the person that's experiencing the encounter with what I think is like sound, all right, low frequency sound. And you hear so many stories where people are like, oh my God, like I suddenly felt this like doom. I felt I was going to die. I just had this feeling in the pit. And people are just thinking naturally, oh, they're probably just describing like the feeling of fight or flight. Yes, they are. But I think these beings are emitting a frequency towards them. And it makes sense, because what is it supposed to do? It's to incapacitate them. And you see this with like lions and like felines and stuff, where when they growl, they emit in that growl. What I looked up, it's actually a low frequency infrasound wave below 18 hertz. All right. And that, when a tiger growls, penetrates, literally, it rattles the bones and momentarily paralyzes the nervous system of the prey. Basically, it freezes them so that the tiger or the animal has got an advantage in trying to secure the prey. I think there's a similar thing going on here. Really, I think that that's what it is that they are using to help incapacitate, as well as the what we call glamour. So here, this is a real world thing, all right, because the sound of doom is actually a proven scientific frequency, all right, and that is below 20 hertz. Anything below 20 hertz this is infrasound, okay? And it's completely inaudible to us as humans, but our bodies absorb the mechanical pressure, all right? So in real world science, it's actually known as the fear frequency. And when humans are hit with this specific frequency, it directly triggers the amygdala, which is exactly what I said, the fight or flight. And it induces a profound, unexplained sense of doom. All right, chills, hyperventilation, wanting to go into a panic attack. It can even cause visual hallucinations, all right? So it becomes, so if we look at it like that, you can see how these aquatic beings could be using these as almost acoustic weapons. And sound weapons are something that is not averse to what we speak about in the conspiracy theory circles. I mean, we've heard about those. Now, a dear friend of mine called Barry Littleton here on YouTube, he does videos on YouTube and stuff like that. I remember hearing from him once talking about the fact that the third eye is in fact act as a form of a projector screen. It's not just something that we see psychically through. It does actually act as a form of a satellite, all right? And it made me think about how, that would be interesting, the way that everything could be connected up here. So the theory of the third eye being a satellite or like a projector lens actually does tie in with what we're talking about here, if we're trying to see how these frequencies are being used by these aquatic beings, all right? Because I wrote here, evolutionary biology shows that the pineal gland actually evolved from a primitive, light sensitive, as they say, third eye, used by early vertebrates to detect predators from above. So it is deeply wired into the visual processing system. So for instance, if an entity wants to make a fisherman see a 5 foot tall regular human instead of a 7 foot tall giraffe, for instance, they would target the pineal gland as the receiver antennae. And so the entity beams a frequency to the pineal gland, which will act as a bridge. So once the pineal gland receives the false signal, the glamour, it has to pass it to the occipital lobe, which is the visual cortex at the back of the head, to actually create the image. So it doesn't really matter if the signal came from the eyes, or if it came from a psychic projection, like from these beings. It will process it into a conscious image. So this is so fascinating, because if you think about now these two stories, like all of these three stories, we see what I consider to be elements of that kind of hijacking. I think we're seeing infrared sound frequency. I think we're seeing that these sirens actually, they could be using this as an acoustic weapon, so to speak. They're using glamour, or what we're saying, this sort of occipital lobe, and maybe projection on that third eye, sort of. It's like almost like a whole system that is being used in order to create the effect and the dynamic that they create. And so therefore now when you listen to these stories, this doesn't necessarily just sound like bullshit. All right, that's what I like to talk about. I'm bringing the realness through mysticism and through real world research to these stories to show that there is backbone. Because what people rely on is thinking, yeah, this is bullcrap. There's like, when you don't have any real world tangible kind of theories about anything, it's very easy to leave it into the realms of fantasy and fiction. But when you can back it up, now we've got legs, no pun intended. So that's what I wanted to say for this video. So guys, let me know what you think, and join me in the next video. But I want to add, there's a third video that I want to add into this triad, because that one's like a smoking gun, and it really does talk, and it really does show what I'm talking about with the sound frequency.